Gospel Tangents is supported by users like you. Please support us at gospeltangents.com or on Patreon. Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology, and first daily Mormon history podcast. I am Rick Bennett. In our final conversation with Dr. Ryan Cragun, we're going to talk about some of the old and new projects he's been working on, and we'll also talk about why he thinks industrialized countries lose their interest in religion. So you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. Okay. And it was interesting, and it's because I have a statistics background. I was really surprised on your article that came out this week. Mm-hmm. You were using 99.9% confidence intervals because everybody uses 95.
Yes.
Why did you pick that?
Sure. Happy to. So for our listeners, this is really basic statistic stuff, but I'm just going to clarify. What we were doing is called a point estimate, right? So we were trying to estimate some parameter, some number in the population. And you do that based on a sample. So we had a sample of 1,900 roughly people. So when you make that estimate, we know statistically that it's not actually the number, right? It's just an estimate. So when you put that in, you want to put what's called a confidence interval around there and say, that's our best guess based on the data that we got, but the true number is somewhere between this lower value and this higher value. It's going to be somewhere in there, right? And you've certainly seen this, like all the listeners will have seen this with presidential polling data, right? Trump's polling at 42% plus or minus 3%. That's the confidence interval, right? Like you said, most people will put it in at 95%. We knew going into this, right, that people were going to be like, oh, come on, 42%?
Right.
That's a huge difference from what the church is reporting. Church is saying 60%, and you're saying 42%? We're like, yeah, right? And it's not that it's the perfect survey, right? It's kind of the standard now. It's what most people use. So it's kind of an online panel that is a quota sample. That's technically what it's called. It's not a true random probability sample. So there are those problems.
But it's probably better than a random sample, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, don't put me under the gun on that one. I don't want to opine on that one, right? It's not perfect. It's as good as we can get these days for less than several $1 million, right? We paid $10,000 for that survey. So just so everybody knows, it wasn't cheap, right? But it's not perfect. So what we also wanted to do is say, look, when you increase your confidence, your interval gets bigger, right? So you could say, I'm 50% confident, but I have a really small margin, right? Or you could say, you know what, I'm 99.9% confident, but your margin gets bigger.
Right. And I always tell people, hey, I'm 52% confident that Trump's going to win, but the margin of his error is anywhere between 0 and 100%. Prove me wrong.
Yeah, because you just gave the whole margin, right?
Exactly.
You can't be wrong.
So that's why the more confidence you have, the bigger your interval is going to be.
Exactly. Right. So that's why we did it, right? And part of that was when it came out at 42%, I was like, okay. Obviously, the very first question that people are going to ask
What's your margin of error?
What's your margin of error? And if your margin of error is big enough that it covers the 50, we can't say that Mormons are a minority in the state anymore, right? They're still the majority. So we put as big of a confidence interval as we could, and it still only reached, I want to say 46%, right? It was like 38 to 46%.
Yeah, I think it was 45.
Yeah, something like that. So we still didn't come close to the 50%, and that's why we could say Mormons are no longer a majority in Utah.
If I remember right, it was like 38 to 45.
Something like that.
So that would be, what, a 5% margin of error? But you're 99.9% confident.
That's the true
that's
population
really
parameter.
confident.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And that got played out, like, journalists don't understand statistics
well
enough to understand what we were actually saying, right? So this very technical conversation we just had about, like, if you increase the margin, if you increase your confidence, you increase the margin of error. They were all just like, the researchers are 99.9% sure that that's the true number. And I'm like, nope, that's not even close to what we said.
That sounds like a test question I used.
Yes, that's not how I framed it. Read the paper. Understand statistics.
And students still miss it.
Yes, absolutely. They're still going to miss it. So anyway.
Well, and so I want to contrast that with this other poll you did on women in priesthood.
Right.
Because that was not, I think you called it the snowball sample.
Yeah, the big,
just like
big
tell
one.
your friends and your friends' friends. Yeah. And so you were able to get huge numbers. but it's not random. And so therefore you can't really put a margin of error on those.
I mean, sure. I don't think we did on any of those.
No, you didn't.
Right? Yeah, we wouldn't put a margin of error because when it's a snowball sample, you can't generalize to a specific population, right? So we can say in our sample of 60,000 members of the church, which is a big sample, this is what we found. But I can't then turn around and say, and this generalizes to the population.
Right.
Right. Whereas with this other sample on the percentage LDS in the state, because it's a representative sample, we can then turn around and say, hey, for Mormons in Utah, this is what we found, right? Like we can do that because of the nature of the sample. With a non-random snowball sample, I don't know the target population. I'm not going to say that.
You're just saying I got these really interesting results and it's not random. And so I don't know.
I don't know if this generalizes to anything beyond the sample. So that's what good statisticians, quote unquote, right? People who know what they're doing statistically will always be very careful in framing what they're doing. Yeah.
I'm going to have you on a lot more times, I can tell. You speak my language.
I'm a stats guy. I like my stats.
I wanted to let you talk about your previous book and then tell us about your upcoming book.
Sure.
What are those about?
Yeah, I'm a terrible. I see a poster up here for The Greatest Showman. Right? I'm a terrible pitch person for my own work. But I had a book come out in May. Yeah, May, called Beyond Doubt: The Secularization of Society, with two colleagues, Phil Zuckerman from Claremont College and Isabella Castlestrand from the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. And what we were looking at, there's publicly available data, right? So World Values Survey, European Values Survey, a variety of different, international social survey program that's been collected over about a 50-year window, starting in the early 80s all the way up through basically today. And in all of those, they've been collecting religious affiliation. So they have, what percentage say they have religious affiliation, percentage belief in God, and religious attendance. So what we did in there is we were trying to understand what's happened over those 50 years. And all of that was in the framework of secularization, right? So what we said is, okay, if secularization is right, what we should see is if countries meet two criteria. They're developing or developed, right? And they have freedom of religion. Then those countries are the ones that should be declining in terms of religiosity. And sure enough, that's what we find, right? That second criteria, I was talking to somebody, was it today or yesterday about this? A lot of people don't realize, right, that there are close to a dozen countries around the world where if you leave the dominant religion, most of them are Muslim, right? But if you leave, the penalty is death, right? We gave a specific example. It took me a while to track down a constitution that was in English that I could actually understand. But in Mauritania, the way that it's worded, right? So I wrote this section in the book, is if you leave Islam, you have 3 days to repent, okay, and come back. If you don't, all of your property is given to the state and you will be put to death.
Wow.
That's in the constitution of the country, right? So you basically have to be clear that, like, okay, people in Mauritania are not going to be leaving Islam, right? They may not believe, but they're not going to tell anybody because they could die. So that's a complication. So we have to factor that in. And then, of course, we don't really expect countries that aren't modernizing particularly rapidly, which most countries are modernizing to some degree. But if they're not modernizing, we wouldn't expect them to be secularizing either. So as long as you have those two criteria, modernizing and freedom of religion, we would expect religiosity to be declining. And we see that in almost every country. I will just kind of tell your listeners, like, your listeners are probably fairly educated. They could read the book. They'd probably enjoy it. We get into some pretty detailed arguments. It's really an academic book, right? So it's not written for a lay audience. It's readable. It's very readable. I think most people can get that. But there are going to be parts where we go off into like really niche arguments that are specifically tied to the sociology of religion. So we tackle the religious economies model, right? Which we talked about earlier about the cyclical cycle and demand for religion being constant. We tackle some of that. We tackle some other ideas. So there are some parts where we get pretty into the weeds when it comes to the sociology of religion. But the general idea is, hey, what's happening with religion around the world? If the countries meet those two criteria, religion's declining. So that one came out. That was with New York University Press, came out in May. Fun. We've had a good response. Lots of people like it. People don't think it's perfect, right? Which is fine. Like, no book is ever perfect. But generally, people have been pretty supportive of the book. So that's good. You want me to talk about the next one?
Yeah. It sounds like I'm going to have to read this one and then
you should definitely read that.
Maybe in April?
Sure.
Are you going to come for the Juanita Brooks conference?
I just found out that I've got funding, so I'm going to try and be there. There's
that would be awesome.
Time complication thing, so I might go a day early, but I have to leave like the night of the conference to get back for something.
Okay, we'll arrange something.
We can do it. So if you read the book, let me know. We're happy to talk about it. The next one is also with New York University Press, different co-author. His name's Jesse Smith. He's at Western Michigan University. Secret, he doesn't tell anybody, but he's also a former Mormon. Grew up south of Provo, so not far.
I think there's a lot of people like this because I'm like, why are all these people from these weird universities studying Mormons?
Well, and he really doesn't, right? He basically cut his teeth on atheism stuff, right? So he's been studying people who leave religion since the beginning of his doctoral degree. But this book is not about Mormonism at all, right? So there's nothing really. I mean, we probably mentioned it a few times as examples, but it's about people leaving religion in the U.S. The title is Goodbye Religion, right? I like double entendres, so there are a couple of double entendres here. But so we're looking at kind of what I mentioned, those push and pull factors. So there's some theory in there, but we have a lot of data, and that one is very mixed methods. So all the quantitative stuff, we use top level surveys. So the general social survey is kind of the gold standard. We use some Pew surveys where we need additional questions, but then we have 120 interviews that Jesse and I did over the years. And we draw pretty heavily from those for some of the arguments that we're making where we just don't have good quantitative data to make the argument. But we're basically building an argument for like, why are people leaving religion in the U.S.? And try and explain it. And we show the numbers and we kind of back all of that up. And that'll be out in October. So it's not quite a year from now. That's the launch date. So.
Well, very good.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I've found a kindred spirit here.
Anybody who likes stats, we can hang out. I'm down with that.
So, and I'm going to start coming to these conferences. I just wish I'd have known about them sooner, and I would have had you guys on for years instead of just finding out now. So
all good.
So last question here. Sure. From your opinion, in studying the data, a country that continues to industrialize, religiosity is going to decline. There's nothing the LDS Church can do to reverse that?
The short answer is no. Wow. Yeah, there's really nothing that they can do. Here's a bonus bit. I don't know if you caught this at the conference, but the day before the SSR, actually 2 days before the SSR conference started, I actually went to talk to the researchers of the Church Research Information Division.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they invited me to come give a talk about why people are leaving religion, right? Which I was fine doing. I don't know if they knew that I was a former member of the church when they invited me in, but so be it. So in that, I straight up told them, I was like, look, you're not going to stop this, right? Like, you can do lots of things, right? And they're trying, right? I don't know if your listeners know this, right? I don't know how many people actually know this, but the church actually employs somewhere between 30 and 50 social scientists, people with masters and PhDs in sociology or psychology or anthropology in social science disciplines who work full time for the church. They read all the same journals I read. They read all the same books I read, right? They have the same training that I have. They're studying these very same questions to try and answer what's going on and try and figure out what it is they need to do. Now, I don't know that most of them are being tasked with the same things that I get to study, right? They are studying very different things. But when I told them that, I said, look, you might be able to slow things down a little bit, but based on the current trends and everything we understand about how, people work, you're not going to reverse this. Secularization is happening, right?
So pour your resources in Africa?
They're not going to... The 30% of people in the U.S. who now no longer identify as having a religious affiliation, that's actually a misrepresentative number, I think, at some level. So It's roughly 30% say they have no religious affiliation, but we leave out what I think is actually the most important part of that. Only 20% of people in the U.S. regularly attend religious services.
20?
20. 80% don't regularly attend religious services. We are not a really religious country. Okay, I don't think people realize that.
Do we know? I think John Lynn gave the number 30, 1/3 of LDS people attend.
That's probably right.
And so that would be higher
than the general population.
The national general public.
Yeah. So it's only 20%, right? And then if we look at something like belief in God, I mean, heaven and hell, those have held pretty steady, but belief in God has been declining over the last 50 years to where today it's about 50% of the population say they know God exists, right? On the other side are people who are like, maybe, I'm not sure, right? I believe in a higher power. I don't believe at all. It used to be that you got those numbers when I first started doing this, right? In the early 2000s, it was like, 90+% of Americans believe in God. Well, they were aggregating all of the people who are like, well, I believe sometimes, right? Is that belief in God? That sounds an awful lot like some form of soft agnosticism to me, right? So all of those other categories, the kind of I believe sometimes, I believe but doubt, I believe in a higher power, I don't think there's a way to find out, and I know there's no God, right? Or I don't believe in a God. All of those now make up 50% of the population. It's only 50% who say, I am confident in a Judeo-Christian God existing.
Aren't the numbers higher than that as far as belief in God? I thought it was more like 70% of Americans. It's 50? You're telling me it's 50?
It depends on how you aggregate those groups, right? And so if you're trying to make the arguments like, Americans really believe in God, then throw in the I believe but doubt, right? Or I believe sometimes. That's usually what people do if they're trying to accentuate how religious Americans are. But if you only use the one category, I am confident God exists, right? Or I know God exists. That's 50% of Americans today. That's it, right?
Interesting.
20% are attending. 80% are not regularly attending services. And people don't seem to catch that, right? So
that seems low to me, but that's interesting.
Well, so here's the fun part, right? The reason why we know that is all the way up through, the 90s is when we actually found this out. But through today, when you ask people in a survey, how often do you attend religious service? Roughly once a week, right? That number comes in today at like 35, 38%. Say they attend once a week. But in the 1990s, somebody working for one of the big progressive churches in the U.S. said that number cannot be true. If it was true, we would need twice as many churches as we have, right? His name, Hadaway. I'm forgetting his first name. Anyway, Hadaway was his last name, right? And then Mark Chaves and somebody else actually came on, Peggy Long Marler. So there were three of them. They had this enterprising idea. In the 1990s, they said, you know what? Let's actually go count. So they went to two counties, one in Ohio and one in Georgia. They were rural counties. They filled out a survey, asked people, right, months in advance, how often you attend religious services? Came in at like 40%, said roughly every week. Then, on a specific week, they went to all of the clergy in those counties and they said, give us your attendance numbers. And if the clergy wouldn't participate, if they said no, they sat in the parking lots and counted. Isn't that wonderful? This is social science. Like, I love this kind of social science, right? They're like, we don't believe you. You're saying 40%, and when they counted, guess what number came back? 21%.
Oh, wow. Well, we talk about that in my statistics class, the social desirability index. It's better to say you go to church even if you don't.
Right? And we can literally see that in the numbers. So it's like a classic thing. So when I say it's 20%, it might be lower than that, right? We don't know the exact number, but it's somewhere in that range. It's only 20%. So when we're talking about like how religious Americans are they that religious, right? I'm not convinced, right? I'm just not sold on Americans being like super religious anymore. 20% attend religious services roughly once a week, right? Maybe 50% are pretty confident a God exists, right? Belief in hell is lower than belief in heaven, right? That's always a fun one, right? So people are far more likely to believe in heaven than they are in hell. What's going on there, right? Like all these fun little statistics kind of bears out. You know what? I completely lost track of the question. What was the question that we were supposed to be answering? You got me down the path of statistics.
I don't know, but it was a great tangent.
Gospel tangents.
There's a reason why we call it that. I think originally we were talking about your next book. Wasn't that the question?
Could be, yeah. So the next one is Goodbye Religion. And yeah, we're wrestling with a lot of these questions, why people are leaving. Should be good, right? So again, mixed methods, a lot of fun. And I'll give a pitch for the last chapter. The last chapter, I think, is
so it's written.
It's done.
It's to the publisher. And
we actually
doing reviews. Probably.
The reviews are done too. So everything's done. We got the copy edits like the week before Christmas. So copy edits is not the proofs, but it's the copy edits, so they went through very carefully, asked some questions, fixing our spelling and grammar and stuff like that. And we got all that back to them. So everything's done. So the next stage will literally be the proofs, right? So we'll get typeset proofs. And at that point, we're literally just looking for typos. We can't change anything else. But yeah, it's
Who's publishing it?
New York University Press. So that's my second one with New York University Press, which I love that press. I shouldn't do this, but like they're way better than Oxford University Press, and
I don't like Oxford either.
No, Oxford will publish anything these days. They just have a really low bar, and I'm just not as impressed with their work. A couple of the books that I just recently reviewed for Oxford University Press, like filled with typos, grammatical mistakes, errors.
Really? That's not why I don't like them. But.
No, they have other issues. But one of them, they took full-length URLs and put them in the body of the text.
Huh.
And I was like, why would you do that? Right? Like no one can click on that. It's print, right? Like it's a book. Why would you put the full length URL there?
Maybe it's for the Kindle.
Yeah. So Oxford University Press is struggling. Sorry. I mean, maybe I'll publish them at some point. If I'm slumming it, I'll go with Oxford University Press. But no, I like NYU Press. They do a really good job.
Okay, well, you'll have to tell them to send me a review copy.
I can get that.
All right.
I can make that happen.
That would be awesome.
Anything else you wanted to cover?
I haven't read enough of your books and your publications, so I will say, give your website because it's one of the best ones. Because I went on there and I read both those articles, and you've got a list of all your publications there. What is it?
The website, ryantcragun.com. It's pretty easy, right? If you Google me, there is another Ryan Cragun. There are actually 3 other Ryan Craguns, which is kind of weird. There's one who competes with me for like the top spot in Google. He plays football for UCLA, right?
That's not you.
That's not me. So if he's a football player and he's big and stocky, you got the wrong website. No, it's Ryan T. Cragun. Usually I'm the number 1 result. Sorry, other Ryan Cragun, if you're listening, but I do usually have the top spot. So I'm pretty easy to find. And then, the website has all of my publications. Don't tell the publishers, but I give all of my papers away for free.
Uh-oh.
So don't tell them. No, nobody let them know. But I did write it. I shouldn't have to pay to get my own publications, and no one else should either. Science and data should be free. All of that should be free. It bugs me that it's not. So, but it's all up there. And then there are links to all my books up there too.
All right, and then give a plug for the MSSR. How do people sign up for that?
Yeah.
Is it A or R?
A. Mormon Social Science Association. We're at mormonsocialscience.org, I think is the website. You can find us. We are the number 1 hit for Mormon Social Science Association. We do have our own journal now. So the Journal of the Mormon Social Science Association, it's in its 2nd year of publications. I think we're going to be switching the format a little bit, but that's out there now. If you're into the social science of Mormonism, that is the place for it, right? We do have a mailing list. You can join that. And you'll be caught up to date on like all of our conferences, all the publications, cool stuff that's happening in that association. Been around for a long time. Lots of cool resources there. So definitely check that out.
Yeah. So I love MHA and I love MSSA.
Glad you found us.
And so Dr. Ryan Cragun from the University of Tampa, thank you so much for being here on Gospel Tangents. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Ryan Cragun. Ryan, thank you for coming all the way out here to Utah in the cold weather, although I know you're a skier, so I'm sure you had a lot of fun. But anyway, looking forward to talking to you in April. In our next conversation, we're going to continue with the social science angle, and I'm going to talk to Scott Vance, and he'll talk a little bit about funding of different Mormon groups.
It's no secret, and it's been published for at least 6 or 7 years, that the LDS Foundation and various LDS affiliated groups were donating some funds to the More Good Foundations. There's public records, 990s, and people publish this online. I was interested in the topic, and I tried to explore that further. So I went through and pulled all the financial records that were publicly available. And then I have listened to not only your podcast, but also hundreds of hours of other people's podcasts, trying to learn what I can about these organizations and how they interact with the church, just to try to understand that relationship.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you to continue to enjoy Gospel Tangents. Consider becoming a Patreon or go to gospeltangents.com/shop, and you can get a cool tie, a hat, or even a nice mug. You can also get a sweatshirt. So check it out at gospeltangents.com/shop.